Welcome to Calm and Crime. Before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now let's begin. Story 1: The Broken Lock. It was last winter. I lived alone in a small house on the edge of the neighborhood. Beyond my backyard, nothing but trees and undeveloped land. I'd been there a year. Quiet, peaceful, never a single problem. For 3 months, the lock on my bedroom door had been broken. A push lock that just stopped catching. It didn't matter, I told myself. I lived alone. As long as the front doors were locked, who cared about a bedroom door? That night I went to bed around 11. Sometime later, I woke up with my heart pounding for no reason. The house was pitch black, and my bedroom door, the one I always closed, was cracked open. Could have been the wind, the cold shifting the house. I got up, closed it, checked that it latched, got back in bed. But something in me wasn't satisfied. I lay there with my eyes open, staring at shadows. 30 minutes later, I heard it. A shuffle on the floorboards, somewhere in the house. I sat frozen, not moving, not breathing. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep because I woke up again, heart slamming, and the door was open again. I started to get up, and then something moved behind the door frame, like someone stepping back into the dark. I froze, no footsteps, nothing, just the wind. I stood there motionless for 5 minutes that felt like hours. Then I ran and slammed the door shut, throwing my whole body against it. He didn't push back. 15 seconds of silence. Then soft, unhurried footsteps moving down the hallway, down the stairs, toward the back door. Then nothing. I called the police. They searched the house and found nothing. But while we stood in the kitchen, I glanced toward the backyard and saw him. A silhouette standing motionless in the trees, watching us through the window. He vanished before the officers could turn around. I stayed at a friend's house that night and for days after. When the snow finally cleared, I found the truth in the woods behind my house. A worn foot trail, packed down by repeated use, leading straight to my back door. He'd been coming for a long time, long enough to carve a path through the forest with his own feet. And the back window, the one he likely used to get in, didn't lock properly either. Just like my bedroom door. I moved out, far away. I just hope I wasn't followed. Story 2: The Empty Road. I was somewhere in northern Oregon, one of those forgotten back roads swallowed by miles of dense forest. Hours into the drive, my gas light came on. My GPS said 45 minutes to the next station. Manageable, I thought. Then the countdown stopped, stuck at 35 minutes. The car icon frozen on the map. Before I could figure out why, the engine sputtered again, died completely. I coasted to the shoulder, dead silence, fog clinging to the treetops, no lights anywhere. I grabbed my phone, no service, 0 bars. I locked the car and started walking, flashlight cutting maybe 10 feet through the fog. 5 minutes in, I heard it, branches snapping. Not wind, something moving. I froze, scanned the trees with my light, saw nothing, kept walking faster. Then I saw a shape near the tree line, an old sedan, half swallowed by the forest, driver's door hanging open, clearly abandoned for weeks. Not crashed, driven there and left. That's when the bushes rustled behind it. Then again. Figures, more than one, moving between the trees, running parallel to me just out of clear sight. My body went cold. I walked faster, refusing to run, refusing to look like prey. Footsteps started matching my pace in the woods, tracking me along the tree line. Then headlights. A pickup truck pulled up beside me and a gray-bearded man leaned out. "You stranded. You're a long way from anything." The second he spoke, every sound in the forest stopped dead. I got in. Best decision I made that night. He drove me 25 minutes to the nearest station, a walk that would have taken hours through that forest. No weirdness, just a stranger doing a good deed. At the station, I called the sheriff to get a ride back to my car. When we got there, my car had been moved. dragged off the shoulder and pushed into the tree line, just like that other abandoned sedan. Someone hadn't wanted it seen from the road. No suspects were ever found. No nearby houses. The other car had no plates, no registration, nothing. I still don't know what would have happened if that truck hadn't shown up exactly when it did. Story 3. The Cabin in the Woods. Spring 2022. I'd booked a small getaway cabin, one of several scattered through a forest on the owner's land, connected by unmarked trails. Just before sunset on my second day, I went for a walk on a path behind my cabin. Deep in the woods, I spotted two men standing motionless, staring down at something on the ground. Odd, but I kept walking. The trail wasn't looping back like I expected. It just kept going straight into the forest. I decided to turn back. That's when a scream ripped through the trees, an animal-like bellow, but wrong somehow. Unnatural. I spun around. The two men were now on the trail behind me, far off but facing me, motionless, watching. I backed away. They melted into the trees and vanished. I hurried back to the cabin, telling myself it was nothing. I made tea, sat by the fire, started to relax. 15 minutes later, that same scream again. Closer this time, or maybe not, I couldn't tell through the walls. I searched for the sound online, found nothing that matched. Half an hour after that, boots hit the porch outside my front door. Stopped. 20 seconds of silence, then a slow knock. I looked through the peephole. Two men. Cheap plastic animal masks, hoods up, identical. I dialed 911 with shaking hands. They knocked again. Then something slammed hard against the door, a blow that made my whole body flinch. Then footsteps retreating. I watched through the peephole as they walked back into the woods. The police found a knife mark gouged into the outside of my door. I never went back to those cabins. I still check the news for that area sometimes, half expecting to find something. So far, nothing. What those men wanted, I'll never know. Story 4. Carter RUNS. 15 hours to visit friends from college. My buddy Carter and I planned to split the driving. I never got comfortable enough to sleep on his shift, so by the time it was my turn again, I was exhausted, running on fumes in more ways than one. The gas gauge slipped past empty before I noticed. The car sputtered and died on the shoulder of an empty highway, nothing around but flat plains and darkness. The nearest station, 4 miles up the road. Carter decided to walk there with an empty gas can while I stayed with the car. Within a minute he was out of sight. Then headlights, a car crawling past at 15 miles an hour when the limit was 60. It didn't speed up. It slowed down more, then did a 3-point turn and came back. Passed again at 5 miles an hour, clearly staring through my windows, then peeled off the way it came. I called Carter. No answer. Called again. Nothing. Something in my gut told me to move. I locked the car and jogged after him. 15 minutes in, I called again and heard his ringtone faint somewhere off the road in the dark grass. I saw a phone screen glowing in the weeds. Carter. No answer. Then his voice hoarse, telling me to get down. I dropped into the grass just as that same car came crawling back, making slow pass after slow pass, hunting the roadside. Once it finally left, we sprinted for the gas station. Carter told me everything. The man had pulled over, tried to get him into the car. When Carter refused and ran, the man chased him on foot before giving up and driving after him instead. Carter dove into the grass and hid, losing his phone in the process, too terrified to move. Police got a description of the car. They never found him. I'll never forget to check the gas gauge again. Story 5. The house too big to be an Airbnb. New job, new promotion, constant travel. This week's Airbnb was farther from the office than usual, a 40-minute drive that ended at a house 4,000 or 5,000 square feet. Way too big, way too cheap for what it was. The first night, the whole place creaked constantly. I went downstairs for water around midnight, and the moment I reached the first floor, Every single creak I'd been hearing upstairs went completely silent, like someone had frozen in place the instant I moved. The next night, back from drinks with coworkers, I finally walked through the rest of the house. Furniture slightly out of place. A kitchen chair pulled out that I was certain had been pushed in that morning. I pushed it back under the table and told myself I just missed it. I went up to shower, got in bed, and the creaking started again the second I lay down. Footsteps, cabinets opening. I got up, opened my door, and the sounds didn't stop. I crept to the stairs. The instant my foot hit the first step, silence. A light was on in the kitchen, one I was sure I'd turned off. I walked down and looked in. The chair was pulled out again, and behind it in the dark room beyond, a figure was peering around the corner, staring straight at me. We locked eyes for one frozen second before he vanished. A door slammed somewhere I couldn't even locate. I grabbed my phone and ran straight out of the house, calling the police from my car. They never found him. The host insisted there was no door where I'd heard one slam. My company moved me to a hotel for the rest of the trip. I still think about how long he might have been in there with me before I ever noticed. Story 6. The Motel Counter. Laid off, 28, alone in a new city. I took the only job I could find, night counter clerk at a highway motel 30 minutes outside town. Nothing around but an abandoned restaurant next door. This was my first night alone. A woman checked in, visibly rattled, glancing over her shoulder the whole time. Later, a man walked in asking about rooms, eyes drifting past me toward the key wall the entire conversation. When I offered to check him in, he said no and walked out. I never heard a car start. He'd walked here from 10 miles down an empty highway. Half an hour later, the phone rang. The woman, frantic, a man was standing outside her door and wouldn't leave. I ran out. He was already gone. When she described him, I knew instantly. The man from the lobby. She refused to let me call the police, said she just wanted him told to leave. 2 hours later, a crash echoed through the whole building. I sprinted to her room. Her door was wide open, and inside the man had her cornered. I yelled, I don't even remember what, and he turned, face full of rage, bloodshot eyes, and charged straight past me, out into the highway, gone into the trees. She was safe. Barely. Turned out he'd circled the building while I checked on her, stolen the spare key from the wall behind the counter. And the truth came out. She'd lied. It was her ex-husband. Violent history. She'd been running from him the whole time, and she'd hoped he'd just leave quietly rather than escalate things with police involved. I kept the job a few more months before the parade of strange, dangerous people finally wore me down. Story 7. The Delivery. I downloaded DoorDash weeks earlier and finally decided to try it out one slow night. 3 hours in, past midnight, an order popped up with a massive tip, $30 or $40. I accepted without thinking. Pickup. The only 24-hour McDonald's in town, right where the highway dissolved into nowhere. 2 minutes into the drive, the customer called, voice flat and irritated, demanding I confirm the address. When I read it back, he hung up without a word. 15 minutes down a road cutting straight through empty farmland, I turned onto a dirt driveway swallowed in fog. A farmhouse appeared at the end of it, lights on, matching address on the door. I got out, walked up, knocked. The door creaked open on its own, already unlatched. A man's voice called from the back of the house, confirming I was the driver, then asked me to bring the food inside to the kitchen counter instead of leaving it on the porch. His tone was still off, angry almost. I stepped inside, musty smell of old wood, then loud piano music blasting suddenly from somewhere in the back of the house. I called out, no response. Walking toward the kitchen, I noticed the room beside it was pitch dark. I dropped the bag and turned back for the door, and there he was, standing in the darkness a few feet from the exit, eyes wide and glowing white in the shadow, staring straight at me like I'd caught him mid-act. Something in his hands. I never looked closely enough to see what. I bolted. got in my car and drove straight through the fog back to the road. I'm certain now the music was cover, meant to mask the sound of him creeping up behind me to lock the door. I deleted the app that night and never looked back. Story 8. Milo knew. Last fall, I house sat my sister's German Shepherd, Milo, while she flew out for Halloween weekend. Easy dog, usually. But that day, he kept snapping his head up toward the doorway, staring for minutes at a time at nothing I could see. Late afternoon, I took him for a walk on the forest trail behind the house. Halfway through, he stopped dead. Wouldn't move. Eyes locked on something down the trail I couldn't see. I turned us back and he followed close, tail down, glancing behind us the whole way home. Back inside, I thought I glimpsed someone passing a window upstairs, there and gone before I could focus on it. That night, Milo stayed glued to my side, unusually tense. Before bed, I took him out back one last time. The second I opened the door, a man came charging straight at us from the side of the house. Milo lunged, snarling, and the man skidded to a stop, dodging the dog before backing off and vanishing into the dark. I called 911. While talking to the officers, I discovered the back door lock didn't actually catch, the lever clicked, but the door still opened. My sister swore it had always worked fine. I think he'd been watching the house all day, maybe even inside while I worked upstairs, oblivious. Milo saved us both. My sister's had no trouble since, which makes me wonder if he wasn't after her at all, if he'd been watching me, and this was simply the moment he chose to act. Story 9. The eerie. Mid-20s, working as a Lyft driver on overnight shifts I couldn't afford to be picky about. Every ride request, I accepted first and thought later. This one took me far outside town, to a location that looked like nothing on the map. I arrived to a completely empty stretch of road. No houses, no paths, nothing. Waited, got no response, canceled, and started driving back. 5 minutes later, another request, same area, a mile further down. This time, a man stood waiting on the shoulder, jeans, gray hoodie, a duffel bag over his shoulder. No visible way he could have gotten there. He got in, watched me in the mirror the entire short drive. The drop-off was just as barren as the pickup. When I stopped the car, he told me to get out. I turned to argue and found a gun pointed at my face, his eyes flat and empty. I had no choice. He marched me off the road and into the forest, staying several feet back the whole time. 10 minutes deep into the trees, he told me to stop. I knew what was coming. Adrenaline took over. I bolted deeper into the darkness. He shouted for me to stop. I didn't. Then a gunshot cracked through the trees and silence followed. He wasn't chasing anymore. I walked blind through the woods until I found a road, a house, someone willing to help. My car and everything in it was gone by the time police searched the area. The account he used on the app was a dead end. I kept driving for a few more months, getting occasional requests from that exact same spot, calling the police every time. They never found anyone. Eventually, the paranoia won and I quit. Story 10. The roof. Alone at my cabin-style house on the edge of town, right after a heavy winter snowfall. First night, I heard a sharp crack outside, not wind, not an animal. A branch deliberately stepped on. Then a shadow shifted between the trees outside my bedroom's floor-to-ceiling windows. Nothing after that. I told myself I'd imagined it. The next day felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain, that sense of being watched that never fully left. That evening, I noticed a lamp in the den had gone dark. I turned it back on. Minutes later, glancing over my shoulder, off again. Not a bulb dying. The switch physically flipped down. Someone was in my house, luring me toward that room. I moved from my bedroom to grab my phone and keys and froze. Through the window, a large figure stood just feet away in the dark, watching me. I ran for the front door and heard 2 sets of footsteps converging from the other side of the house. I made it to my car as the figure came sprinting around the corner after me. I floored it down the driveway, watching him stand in my headlights as I fled. Police arrived 30 minutes later to find my house destroyed, windows shattered, doors ripped from hinges, furniture flipped, the walls dented and torn. I'd heard two voices inside and seen one man outside. 3 people had been in and around my home while I sat there alone, watching TV. I stayed in a hotel for weeks while the house was repaired and sold. I still dream about that hallway sometimes, walking toward the room with the light switched off, not knowing what's waiting just past the doorway. Story 11, Piper. After my marriage ended, I stayed alone in the massive house we'd bought together, far too big for one person. Most of its rooms left permanently empty. 2 years of that emptiness finally pushed me to adopt a rescue dog, an 8-month-old beagle named Piper. She was thrilled at the shelter, thrilled in the car, and the instant I brought her inside the house, she went completely timid, clinging to my side. I chalked it up to a new environment. The next day, working at my desk, she suddenly bolted from the room and started barking wildly downstairs. I found her standing in the middle of an empty room, barking at a blank wall. She wouldn't stop trembling until I picked her up and shut the door. That night I woke to find her frozen at the bedroom door, ears up, staring at the gap beneath it. I somehow fell back asleep without thinking twice, a decision I still can't explain. The next evening, she vanished from under my desk. I found her cowering in that same downstairs room, door mysteriously ajar, facing the doorway, terrified. And behind me in the hallway, someone watching from around the corner. I slammed the door and locked it. Footsteps approached, stopped just outside, and lingered unhurried, unbothered, like whoever it was had all the time in the world. Then they walked calmly away. When police searched the house, they found it. A hidden nest in a closet upstairs, evidence someone had been living inside my home for months, sleeping by day, moving by night. Piper had known the whole time. I sold the house. I still worry sometimes that whoever it was is still out there. Story 12, The Thing in the Road. Driving 20 hours home for Thanksgiving, I pulled off a lonely single-lane highway at a gas station that looked barely alive. The attendant, closing up for the night, said I could sleep in the lot if I was comfortable with it, a phrase that stuck with me strangely. An hour into trying to sleep, tires crunched into the gravel beside my car. A dark pickup truck, headlights off, parked right next to me, facing my window. I couldn't see the driver. I didn't wait to find out. I started the car and left. A quarter mile down the road, my tire hit something. I pulled over to look, a large shape in the gravel that looked disturbingly like a body bag. Before I got close enough to be sure, I heard tires again, coming fast down the road behind me. I sprinted back to my car. The truck screamed up behind me, swerved to a stop, and 2 men jumped out as I floored it away. My hands were shaking too hard to dial. No signal for 45 minutes. Police found nothing when they finally searched. I never took that road again, and I still don't know what I drove past that night, or what would have happened if I'd stopped to look closer. Story 13, MoMA. Snowy Halloween. My friends John, Hayden, and I trick-or-treated through the storm despite our parents' hesitation. At one house, we passed a man standing motionless in the driveway, thick jacket, a disturbingly realistic mask with long black hair draped over his shoulders. Hayden recognized it. Momo. He didn't move, just watched us. We hurried off and the blizzard swallowed him from view within seconds. John went home early. Then Hayden split off too, leaving me to walk the last stretch alone. Across the street, through the trees, a figure kept pace with me, matching my stride exactly. When it passed under a streetlight, I saw the mask. He'd been waiting the whole night for one of us to be alone. I ran the rest of the way home, locked the door, and didn't tell my parents. Minutes later, the doorbell rang. I looked down the hallway as my mom answered it. My stomach dropped. It was him. He didn't take candy, didn't speak. He looked past my mom, straight down the hall at me, then turned and walked away. My mom brushed it off as a prank. I never told her the truth. Story 14, The shadow under the door. Halloween heavy snow. Trick-or-treaters thinned out early. Around 7, I found my front door swinging open in the wind. I figured I'd just left it unlatched. Hours later, doing dishes, I heard a creak from directly above me. Went upstairs to check and found my closet door standing open. Nothing inside, nothing out of place. But 2 doors opening themselves in one night was too much to be nothing. I locked my bedroom door and paced, trying to think it through. Then I saw it, a shadow, motionless under the door. Someone was standing right outside. I froze completely, not daring to move or breathe for 2 or 3 minutes straight. The doorknob turned slowly, once, twice, clicking against the lock. Then the shadow retreated. I waited 10 more minutes in dead silence before calling the police, still whispering. By the time officers cleared the house, whoever it was had gone. No leads, no suspects, just the certainty that a few seconds difference would have changed everything. Story 15, The Sea. Countryside, alone, first time I'd ever had anyone trespass on my property. Getting ready for bed, I heard voices outside, at least 2 people trying to stay quiet. The moment I stepped up to my window, they went dead silent. They'd seen me. I checked every window in the house. Nothing visible. Went outside onto the porch to listen, and was hit with the overwhelming sense of being watched from multiple directions at once. I retreated inside and locked everything. Hours later, a crash tore me out of sleep, a rock through the hallway window. Then voices, shouting commands to each other, and heavy slams against my front door that shook the whole house. More windows shattered. I locked myself in my bedroom and called 911. The front door burst open. Footsteps, multiple sets, flooded through the house below me, some of them laughing. Officers were still minutes out. I climbed out my bedroom window onto the sloped roof, closed it behind me, and crawled higher. They broke into my room seconds later, tore through it, searched the entire upper floor. I lay flat on the roof above them until sirens finally sent them scattering into the dark. My home was destroyed inside, nothing stolen, which meant only one thing: they hadn't come for anything. They'd come for me. Story 16, The Warehouse. Night shift at a small shipping warehouse, completely alone from midnight to 6. Dead quiet, no machines running, nothing but crickets outside. I heard light footsteps near the front office. Called out for my boss. No answer, nothing when I checked. An hour later, through the office window overlooking the floor, I saw a silhouette moving between the shelving. I shouted and grabbed a metal tool, searching aisle by aisle. Nothing. Every row empty. At the back hallway leading to the manager's offices, I opened a door, found nothing, and turned to leave just as another door opened somewhere down the corridor. A man stood at the far end. Early 20s, disheveled, eyes wide and wrong. I told him to leave, bluffed that I'd called security. He started walking toward me. Then he threw something, a hammer or wrench, that missed my head by inches and slammed into the door frame beside me. I ran. He chased, 10 to 15 feet behind, all the way to the office where I locked myself in. He slammed his body against the reinforced door and window, screaming, punching the heavy-duty glass until he finally gave up and disappeared out the back. Police reviewed the cameras, grainy, no clear face, just confirmation he'd been stalking me through the building the entire shift. I stayed at that job a while longer before finally deciding it wasn't worth the risk of him coming back. Story 17, The Mimic. 18, home alone while my parents were away. Mid-morning, my friend across the street texted, "Who's the guy outside your house?" I checked the window. Nobody there. He swore he'd seen someone trying to look through my windows. Hours later, cooking dinner, a shadow flickered across the wall in front of me. I checked the window, nothing, but the unease stuck. That night in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the hallway outside my door was too dark, too quiet. I got up to turn on lights and grab a snack, leaving every downstairs light on behind me. Heading back upstairs, I paused mid-step. I'd heard footsteps that echoed wrong, not quite matching my own. I tested it, walking up and down again. It didn't repeat the same way. I bolted for my room, locked the door, and called the police, certain someone was mimicking my footsteps to mask their approach. On the phone with my friend, he suddenly said, "Oh shit." He just watched a man climb out a side window of my house and sprint into the trees. The same man he'd seen that morning. Police connected it to a similar incident nearby, another kid home alone, a man at the window trying to talk his way inside. Nobody knows what he wanted. He never had a car. He's still out there. Story 18, The Wrong Door. Road trip across the country. Stopping for the night at an isolated cabin, far more remote than advertised. The front door didn't match the rest of the building. A heavy modern door bolted onto an otherwise old wooden cabin. I didn't think much of it at the time. An hour after falling asleep, I woke to a feeling, not a sound. I looked out the window and saw a figure moving through the pitch-black woods, watched it for 30 seconds before it vanished. 40 minutes later, still awake, a knock came at the door inches from where I lay. A man's voice, aggressive. "Open up. I know you're in there." I dialed 911 with a phone barely holding signal while he kept pounding. He gave up on the door and I heard glass shatter my car window. By the time police arrived, he was gone, but tracks led straight into the trees. The cabin owner later admitted a previous guest had faced the exact same thing, except that time the door had actually been broken down with a sledgehammer. He'd replaced it and said nothing, worried it would scare off future bookings. I was just glad to get out alive. Story 19, Behind the Dumpster. Overnight shifts at a gas station, mostly dead quiet after 10. Taking out the trash one night, I nearly walked straight into a man standing behind the dumpster. He said nothing, just stared with a flat, empty expression. I brushed it off and went back inside. 15 minutes later, I caught movement near the back room doorway. Lights off in there. I leaned around the corner to check, and he was standing pressed against the wall, waiting. The second I saw him, he lunged around the corner. Same disturbing blankness, now twisted into something closer to rage. I barely registered the knife in his hand before he swung it at me. I threw myself backward into a shelf and ran, straight out of the store, calling 911 from down the street. He was gone by the time police arrived. No name, no leads, no explanation for why he'd been waiting for me. I quit not long after and never heard anything else about him. Story 20, Someone in the Basement. Alone at home on a long weekend, a few beers in, half watching TV, when a tapping sound came from somewhere behind me. Checked the house, nothing. It happened again a while later, and this time I found the source. A back window standing open, and the basement door open beside it. Stupid, but I went down anyway. Dim lights barely lit the unfinished space, thick with shadowed corners deep enough to hide anything. The fear hit me all at once. I backed out, shut the door, shoved a heavy piece of furniture against it, and called the police. An officer happened to be nearby and arrived fast, flashlight and weapon drawn. It took him 10 seconds to find a man crouched in the dark corner by the stairs, close enough that I'd probably stood 3 feet from him without knowing. He was armed with a kitchen knife, surrendered without a fight. He wasn't homeless. He had an apartment, a regular job, and claimed he'd broken into shelter from the elements, despite the mild weather outside. No real explanation ever surfaced. I still think about how close I stood to him in that dark before I ever knew he was there. Story 21, The Face in the Wind. Working late at my desk on a rainy spring night, I leaned back to stretch and found a face pressed against the window beside me. Smiling, staring straight at me, unmoving even after I noticed him. I stood up, and he stepped calmly away from the glass and out of sight. Outside, I found muddy footprints leading from the window into the trees. Against my better judgment, I followed them. They led me deeper into the woods, and then I realized the prints were only facing one direction, toward my house. There was no trail leading away, only one leading in. I turned to run back inside and froze. Through the window, someone was now standing in my house, looking out at me. I ran straight for my neighbor's door instead, banging until they woke and called the police. By the time officers arrived, the intruder was gone, but the back door had been forced open, right around the moment I'd stepped outside to look for him. Story 22. The cabin that knew his name. After my father passed, I made the 6-hour trip to his old cabin, deep in the woods outside the abandoned town he grew up in. I found the cabin still standing, though clearly someone had squatted there years earlier. I settled in for the night despite a restless, uneasy feeling I couldn't shake. At sunrise, from a hilltop overlook, I spotted a single light flickering in one of the abandoned town's buildings. Then it switched off. Someone else was out here. All day working on the cabin, I couldn't shake the sense that I wasn't alone. That night by the fire, I heard footsteps approaching the cabin, a knock, and then a voice called out my father's name. My whole body went still. I asked who was there. An old friend of the man who built this cabin, the voice said. I told him my father had passed. A pause, and something in the sympathy that followed didn't sound right. He pushed to be let in, voice shifting from friendly to insistent to outright demanding. Kid, open the door. You going to let me die out here in the cold? That's not what your father would want. I backed away, grabbed my knife, and said nothing. He punched the door once, hard, in anger, then walked away into the woods. I stayed awake the whole night. At sunrise, I packed up and ran for my car, still hidden exactly where I'd left it. I drove home without stopping. I still don't know who he was, how he knew my father's name, or what would have happened if I'd opened that door. Story 23. The picture. Home from work, gaming late while waiting for friends to log on, when an unknown number called twice in a row. I let it ring through both times. It called a third time immediately, too persistent for a scam. I picked up, silence but wind in the background. Someone was there. I hung up unsettled. My friends swore it wasn't them. The calls stopped once I was on a group call gaming. At 2 a.m. after we hung up, my phone buzzed a text from that same number. A photo of me, sitting at my desk, taken from directly behind me moments earlier. I spun around, no one there. I checked the window, locked, no one outside. I sent the photo to my friends, half hoping it was a prank. None of them were laughing this time. They told me to call the police immediately. I crept out of my room to check the house and found the front door standing wide open. I sprinted back and locked myself in. Footsteps followed, slow and deliberate, stopping right outside my door. A knock. The doorknob turned. More knocks. No words ever. I called the police mid-knock. 30 seconds later, the footsteps retreated. The number traced back to an untraceable burner phone. No name. No explanation. I still wonder what stops him from doing it again. Story 24. The Screaming Street. Working closing shifts, gaming late most nights, I decided to take a walk at 2 a.m. instead. Something I rarely did but always found calming. I wandered further than usual, out past the town homes into an older, quieter neighborhood, then further still, onto a thinner road leading into dense woods. A scream cut through the trees, male, sharp, not a call for help, more like an attempt to get attention. I stopped, waited, heard nothing else, and kept walking. The road kept deteriorating, dimmer lights, older houses, an abandoned feel I hadn't known existed this close to home. The scream came again, closer now, from somewhere behind me. I turned back the way I came, walking fast. Another scream, right where I'd just been, meaning whoever it was had somehow gotten behind me without my noticing. I turned and saw a man in dark clothing on the road, walking toward me. I looked away and kept moving. Every time I glanced back after that, he wasn't there. Then he was. I made it back to my street, shaken but safe, or so I thought. Sitting at my kitchen table catching my breath, I heard shuffling outside my front door, followed by a heavy knock. I looked out. A dark figure stood on my porch, the same man. He'd followed me all the way home. I called 911, staying quiet, watching him knock 5 or 6 times before finally giving up and disappearing. Police found nothing. Over the following month, the knocks kept coming, loud, disturbing, always gone by the time I made it to the door. I still don't know who was screaming in those woods or what he wanted from me, but I know how close I came to being part of something much worse. Thank you for listening to tonight's stories. If you enjoyed them, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And if you're still awake, I'd love to know which story stayed with you the most. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're listening from tonight. Until next time, sleep well, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the most unsettling things hide in the quietest moments. Good night.